Ernie. We're now reconvening as Wicomico County Council and Legislative Session 2018-06, March 20th, 2018. The next item on the agenda, we're still going through the open work sessions, and the next item on the agenda I have is the lease amendment, numbers 5 and 6. Is that correct? Looks like it's you, Weston.
I have some backup in case we need to get into the weeds. Weston Young, Assistant Director of Administration, and I have with me James Harris. He's the Assistant Airport Manager. Dawn was unavailable today.
Okay.
So yeah, we come before you. This is a TSA lease. This past fall, our current agreement with the TSA, which expires end of April of this year, was amended to allow another 10-year extension. And this is basically, they wish to execute said 10-year extension going from end of April 2018 to, or I guess May 1st, 2018 to end of April 2028. And with that, we'll be glad to entertain any questions.
It's just a simple, I mean, there's nothing that we need to know.
Yeah,
It's just I wouldn't say a housekeeping measure, but it's similar to such, isn't it?
yes, the reason there's so much paperwork, as it was explained to me by our attorney, is that it's a two-step lease process. It's a little convoluted, but you know, we're negotiating with the federal government, and that's not always the easiest thing. So this is probably as easy as it comes. But yeah, it's straightforward. It's extending. I want to say the agreement began in 2003. We're approaching the end of a 10-year extension, and this will be adding another 10-year extension. The TSA is going to be there, so that's in a gist what it is.
Okay. Any questions from council? Mr. Taylor, do you have any comments?
I think this is the same thing we looked at before. I think Laura and I,
Yeah, it does require a public hearing, so if council's okay, we can have the public hearing on April the 17th.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? No? All right.
All right, great, thank you.
See how easy it is?
Yep. Thanks, James.
Next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 2018 budget. We have Dr. Hoy here from Warwick Community College. Good afternoon, Dr. Hoy. How are you?
Good afternoon. It's great to see you all today.
Good to see you.
Thank you for bringing me on this beautiful spring morning.
First day of spring.
That's it. Somebody forgot to tell Mother Nature. That's right.
But as we understand, this was an item that should have been included in last year's budget. Is that correct, or this current fiscal year?
That's correct. It was part of our budget submission. It was just missed, unfortunately. This is the $100,000 adult basic education, GED, an external degree program, local match. The local match required by the grant is actually, we paid $112,714. The grant itself is $451,000, and it funds 6 standard positions, about 25 teachers, and some in-kind, we have some in-kind staff requirements on campus. And we had 466 students who participated in the program last year from Wicomico County. They're all Wicomico County residents. Other counties, Worcester and Somerset, have their own local programs. On the Upper Shore, all 5 counties are run out of Chesapeake College through their program.
How did you miss it?
We didn't.
You said you missed it.
Finance missed it.
Finance missed it. It's in our budget.
County
It was in our budget submission
Oh,
to
you
the
mean it-
county.
Yeah, they looked for it when the county
It's-
passed the budget. That's where they missed it.
Right. Once the budget passed, we realized that it wasn't there.
Oh, so it wasn't
was-
your fault that
It was in our submission.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
The way that the way that it was put together for the budget, it was a
It was
little
missed.
out of whack. Yeah, and they hit, Any other, any other questions? No. All right,
I have
what is the
one
process?
question.
Yes.
Are you requesting the same dollar amount in fiscal year 19?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a little clearer. Front and center.
I'm gonna make sure it's not missed this time, huh?
It's gonna be highly this time.
Yes.
Where do we go from here with this? Just, is it gonna come back to us as a resolution?
It will come back as a resolution for consideration.
Okay, all right, council's pretty much good with this? Great. Dr. Hoy, thank you very much. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
See you.
Don't get wet.
Next item on the agenda is very similar to what we've seen here with Dr. Hoy, Tri-County Council for the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland. Mike Pennington and Brad Belichico. Glad to have you gentlemen here.
Very much. And I'll echo the previous comments about this lovely weather we're having. Hopefully spring will occur soon enough.
Ask you yourself.
If you could just, Michael, just briefly explain what was initially there as far as
Yes.
for the funding, et cetera.
Yes, we every year request two different sources of funding.
If you could state your names, gentlemen,
I'm
just for
sorry, yes.
TAC 14.
Michael Pennington with Tri-County Council.
Brad Belichico, Short Transit.
Every year, we submit two budget requests to the council, one for operational funds and one for capital funds. I believe what happened was the two funds were put together as one figure, and I think that led to some confusion about what we were asking for. So there was, in the request, the original budget, there was a $52,000 line item for capital for the help us with the construction or purchase of vehicles at our facility. And in the ensuing activities, that was taken away. So we now have the construction's ongoing. We have additional funds available from MTA to help pay for the construction. But there is a requirement for local match, and this transfer would help us match those funds.
Any
I
questions?
remember that, and we initially took it out. Wayne said to take it out, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because we asked about that.
Yeah, so,
No, I fully understand what happened, but again, I just wanted to clarify how I guessed it went down, because we had two separate requests, one for capital and one for operational. And again, I think it got rolled into one fund, so it made it a little confusing about what was capital, I
Right.
believe. But again, not really party to that side of the conversation.
Understood.
I've got a question, and it's about this Lower Shore Revolving Loan Fund for Worcester County.
Okay.
It was made as $100,000, right?
Yes,
I thought when you did something at Tri-County Council, you did it for all three counties. So how come that was done just for Worcester County and not the other counties?
Let me drop in there, Jim. Why don't we have that conversation at the next Tri-County Council meeting? Because that is a critical issue, and I
don't go
agree.
to Tri-County Council meetings.
Well, you could. I mean, you could attend. Maybe I
Well,
haven't.
I mean, we're talking about giving money from the council as
All
a
right,
contingency
well, go
thing,
ahead.
but I'm looking at why this money was given, and I realize that you're on the board and all, so.
All right, well, go ahead then. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm wondering why we do that.
well,
I thought you were supposed to, it's like supposed to be done three ways.
well, you know, if we want to get into the three-way thing, there's a whole variety of programs that we fund that are, we have allocations from the different counties. But this specific program, as I've explained to the Tri-County Council when we had the meetings, and as I've explained to all the economic development folks in the three counties, is this was an attempt to replace a revolving loan program that was terminated down at UMES. We've been working on it for a year and a half. We had some funds available originally from the state of Maryland in the video lottery terminal funds. In the 2017, FY17 budget, those funds were removed. So there was no funds available to replace that loan fund. Working with the Maryland Department of Commerce, we identified that they put some money aside to help with loan funds in the three counties. They put $100,000 aside for Wicomico County, $100,000 aside for Somerset County, and $100,000 aside for Worcester County. Wicomico County applied for and got their $100,000. Worcester County, we worked with the economic development folks there. They felt like they didn't want to set up the fund, but they would allow us to have those funds on their behalf. Now, the idea being is that, use the analogy I used before, when you tried to get your first credit card, you couldn't get a credit card because you didn't have credit. You couldn't get credit because you didn't have a credit card. We've been applying to a variety of agencies, the USDA, Maryland Department of Commerce, or DHCD. All of these funds, all these programs basically say, well, what funds do you have now? This gave us an opportunity to seed our fund. Now, these funds are, since the grant was the 100,000 for Worcester County, it does need to be used at Worcester County. But it now allows us, but the funds will be granted to the Tri-County Council, so we can now use those funds for match. As a matter of fact, right now, we're working on an application with DHCD for $250,000 that we can now use to expand the fund. Those funds can be used anywhere.
So are you telling me that no Wicomico County tax dollars are part of this $100,000 that's going to Worcester County?
That's correct.
Okay.
Was there any required match
There was a match requirement. We took
on the
that,
part of all three counties?
no, just for the required match came from Tri-County Council. It's funds that we have been able to accumulate through administration fees that we've served for other programs.
Right.
It's other funds that we had available to use for whatever the Tri-County Council determined the best use of those funds.
Yeah. And it is something that Michael and I've talked about. I was forgetting that you don't attend those meetings or you're not on that board.
You know,
You're-
the other problem I have is where you hold your meetings. You know, I don't agree with the way you have them at high-end restaurants.
Yes, sir.
You know,
I'm completely aware of
agreeing
that.
with
Yes, sir.
It still happens anyway, so,
Yeah.
you know, you can spend taxpayer dollars a lot more frugally than that.
I appreciate that. We like to make the contribution to local businesses.
We got a Hardee's down there.
Well,
Now you've gone-
if they have a private meeting room that we can hold a
Now you
meeting.
go
in,
too
we'll try
far,
to do it.
Joe.
Okay.
Now you go too far. But it is something that Michael and I've talked about that we're gonna have on the agenda because it was a concern. Dave Ryan had expressed the real concerns with it. So it will, I don't know if it's gonna come up in the next meeting because I don't know if I'm gonna even be at the next meeting. I think I have a conflict.
Okay.
We may talk about that.
Right.
Getting back to this matter, questions regarding this in particular, Mark?
Yeah, so this was requested as part of the budget, and we cut it and took it
Right.
out. And then you say, since that time, there's been a new development that provides the basis for this request.
Yes.
So, then you asked for the same amount of money. So there was no basis for the request when it was originally asked?
We use the capital grant to match a variety of programs. We have a capital maintenance fund that we get from MTA. We also get capital funds to purchase buses. Originally, this money would have been used in the capital purchase for buses. So that's what the original request was for. In the interim, because of the fact that we're working off of numbers that are 5 years old on our original budget grant funds we got from MTA for the construction, our bids have come in over that. What MTA has agreed to do is they're redirecting some of the funds that we would have been able to use for buses to go to this construction. The bus capital, we might have been able to defer till next year, so we could have maybe tried to get the match next year for that. So the original request was to match funds to purchase buses. MTA, because of the cost overruns in the construction project, has redirected that money to allow us to finish the construction project. But the construction project is, as you can be aware, we can't put it off. I mean, they're already in the phase in that. With the bus purchase, what's the original use of the funds would have been for, we can defer till next year. Once we get that grant, we can carry that over. Now that we have this construction project ongoing, we need this match to come up with, to match the funds that MTA has redirected from the bus capital to construction.
And there's no other way for you to cover that in your current, the approved budget?
Reducing service would be the only place where we have that kind of slack.
So how much do you need for the match then? I mean, is that 52,345 exactly what you need, or?
Well, we just use that number since we need at least 50,000
At least 15?
because it's a $500,000 move of funds from MTA and they require a 10% local match.
It wouldn't be the only way, Brad. You could up bus fares. That would make up the difference too.
Yes, we could.
Yeah.
We are right on line with the highest fares in the state, though, so.
You don't have any competition locally.
I think you've done a good job in trying to cut down because I've been to several of your public hearings that you've had over the years where you've had to change the routes and try to do whatever you could to cut costs and still maintain some efficiency. And I think you've done a pretty good job of it. I know that there was one year where you actually went through a rather lengthy process of actually handing out cards and getting input from
Yes.
people as far as who they were, where they were traveling, whether it was work-related or not. And quite an in-depth study, I think, on that.
Yes,
If I
and
recall.
with funding from the MPO, we were able to do that with a professional company, and it provided a lot of important information, 58% of our ridership don't own a car, don't have any other way to get around.
Any other questions? And again, this will,
This one, we have not received the county executive's recommendation for the contingency transfer yet. I think Weston perhaps can speak on that today. The Warwick one, we have received that one, so that will definitely come back before you guys for formal consideration. Weston, is the executive on board with this?
I'll have to follow up and see, where that endorsement is.
Okay.
well, why are we spinning our wheels in a work session if it doesn't have an endorsement? And that was the whole idea from the beginning, was that we were going to address both of these at the same time, since they both involved the budget from last year. And that was the whole purpose. So I really don't understand why there isn't an endorsement.
Mr. Strasburg, when I spoke to him, he thought that administration was on board, but I have not spoken to him recently.
Well, he's the one that requested it be cut anyway, right?
He didn't request to be cut. He just said that that it was an oversight and it wasn't needed.
Oh, okay.
He had said they made a mathematical error.
We kind of took that as being,
Yeah, no, it wasn't that it wasn't needed, it's that he misinterpreted it when he reviewed it. And he told us he could take it out, but it was a misstep. So that's why I don't understand why we're dragging our feet on this.
If I could just point out, originally we asked for 430,000 from 436,000 as our operating match. And then the county executive reduced that by $52,000. We asked for $120,000 for capital match. They reduced that to $52,000. And I think that's where the confusion came, was the reduction was $52,000 and their new number for the capital was $52,000.
Right. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you,
thank you,
gentlemen.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the proposed charter amendments. I guess the idea here is that over the last few months, there have been numerous suggestions made in regard to fine-tuning, continuing to fine-tune the charter. I believe we're recognizing very much so that, especially in light of what the ballot's going to look like this year, that we want to try to reduce this to a smaller number. Right now, there's 10 items listed here. I guess what we're going to have to do today is sort of decide which would be a highest priority.
Highest priority to keep with the cut.
First, we've got to decide how many we think we want, and then we'll decide which ones to keep. Anybody want to start this discussion here?
Looking.
I mean, it's gonna be a long ballot this year, so, I think one or two would probably be, I mean,
I think we discussed this already, that we were gonna keep it at a short number.
well, yeah, I guess we gotta.
Well, the first item on here is add a new charter section to define local governing body. To me, I think that's sort of a housekeeping measure, and there may be other things that we need to address that are more in line with actual operation of the county.
Does that have to be a charter amendment?
Well, Mr. Taylor had some.
Well, I think it would, because what the code says is that the governing body of the county is either it's a charter county now, with an elected executive, is either the council or the council and the executive as provided in the charter. And essentially, when you look at our charter, there's nothing there. Just a quick general question, when is the next charter review committee? When would that be, Laura?
I'd have to go back and check the dates. I mean, it's not this year.
No, it's not this year, but it's not too far in the future, is it?
I thought it was every decade.
It is.
Yeah, I think it's like 6 years out, probably.
Can't you call it up?
So
if
it's
you want
after, I think it's after 2020, because the last one was after
I
2010.
mean, so that could be a factor in determining how many you want to go with, because some of these probably could be deferred. But there is right now this open question about what is it, because it's not defined, and yet the language governing body is used in many places throughout the state code. So it is, it's somewhat housekeeping, somewhat substantive, I guess you would say.
But it doesn't compromise how we're governing today.
Probably not, because I think you can make a backhanded argument that I think has some legal force, that it's probably the county council anyway, even though it's not specifically defined in the charter. And I discussed that in the memo that I sent you. So if you want to defer on that one, understand.
The second one is a discussion on adding term limits for both the council members and the county executive.
Yeah, this grows out of the recommendation by the commission on the report they submitted.
Actually, that was a
several months.
recommendation from our county executive.
Yeah, that doesn't go to the commission.
Oh, I'm sorry, term limits. I thought you were on the other one. Pardon me.
The charter review
Got ahead of
committee, I
myself.
think, recommended term limits for the executive, not for the council. So the charter review committee did that, so.
Our county executive, though, specifically sent over a letter asking.
Oh, yeah, no, I recognize that.
And you know, the
Yeah.
state, you know, the state has term limits for the governor, but it doesn't have term limits for legislative bodies. So I guess the executive branch has term limits, correct? And, you know,
Same with the federal government.
same with the federal government. So if we were gonna do anything, I would say amend it to, or do it for the county executive's position, not the council. And I kinda take this a little personally anyway, because Bob brought my name up when he was talking about it to Greg Bassett. Said I'd been here too long. So I think that's part of the reason he, and he kinda criticizing former council members that had served for a lengthy time, so.
So should the charter amendment say that we have term limits for Joe Holloway?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Anybody named Holloway?
Yeah, there's term limits every 4 years anyway, because you have to vote.
You have to be elected.
I'd say leave it, I'd say take both of them all, not just,
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue. I don't remember anybody coming up,
Not heard any
wanting it on the
complaints,
charter.
yeah.
I have not.
I think that'd be a low priority anyway.
Well, speaking of what Larry said, I mean, I know we received criticism before by going through this process without hearing from the public. I don't think this should be our final determination. I think that we should, throw it out to the public that we are, this is a year when charter amendments can be put on the ballot. If they have suggestions, let us know. I mean, I don't know if there will be anybody at the charter review committee. We asked for public comments and we received, one, so I don't know if there is much public,
Well, what you're,
attention put on it.
so what you're suggesting to put an ad in the paper to advertise these 10 charter amendments?
No, I mean, I'm
Public hearing?
saying that we can say, we don't have to say anything to the state until the summer, I believe. So if the public wants to let us know their thoughts on these things, they can do so.
How do we get that word out to the
Doing
public?
it right now,
We can tell them right now. So, I mean, that's part of what I'm saying right now is that.
and Bob can do it, and his,
Yeah.
So you just want me to read the 10 charter amendments?
No, I mean, as we discuss it, and I'm saying,
Okay.
Obviously, what I'm saying is this isn't the end of the process. The public can let us know what they think about this.
Still on the table, but we're not inclined to go there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not saying about the specific, I'm saying in general, so.
Okay, thank you. That's good, very good point. I mean, it really is. It really is a different approach to deciding how you might evaluate the charter amendments before it goes to the polls.
but how about if you have folks come in and want other things added?
You listen to it very well.
Yeah, but I mean, do you change this? I mean, I don't have a problem.
We'd put 20 on here if we had enough people came in and said they wanted to, and then we'd have to cut it down, like we always do, we have to
Yeah.
evaluate.
It's gonna cost a lot of money too.
Any more discussion on the term limits?
Next.
The third one is the charter section compensate, remove within 15 days after the beginning of the fourth. This is what we had talked about on the compensation committee, where we felt that the timing, it's set up to be wrong timing no matter what the circumstances, and this would change that. Is that something, well, comments?
This is the one I also sent a memo on because there's a couple aspects of this. The state law for the salary review for the council, essentially, it looks like it imposes the 15-day, first 15 days of the fourth term of the council as the time when the commission submits its report. That's essentially what the state law says. That has been reflected in our charter and also in our code for the council and also for the executive. The state law doesn't have that same 15-day of the fourth year requirement for the county executive. That's sort of open. I guess the commission could come in anytime they want to. I mean, you can appoint the commission whenever you want to do that. The state law doesn't even govern that. The only thing it governs is 15 days of the last year of the council's term for the recommendation of the council salaries. Now, to get to where the commission wants to go, you'd have to amend the charter, you'd have to amend the code, and that would eliminate that fourth year requirement as far as the exec's concerned. But I think it would still remain in place for the council. I don't think you can undo that because of what it says in the state code. As far as the sheriff's concerned, the sheriff doesn't, neither the state code, nor the charter, nor the county code address that. I don't know why the sheriff is in that commission's recommendation, other than I guess that's what the council asks for.
Probably because he's elected.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but what I'm saying is it's not required by anything. It's just, it's being done on, I guess you would say, an optional basis at this point.
Right.
So I guess the issue is, do you want to split it in terms of when they make their recommendation and when the council acts on the recommendation into two different time periods, or do you just want to leave it like it is so that everybody comes in at the same time, which would be the fourth year of the council's term?
Any comments from anyone?
Yeah.
Anyone have an inclination to keep this on or take it off?
Well, I guess, again, we can follow Mark's recommendation here, wait until we hear from the public on it.
Well, there's going to come a time where we have to make a decision on
Yeah.
probably three of these, no matter what.
Well, I mean, I think it was Matt who kind of had mentioned this before. I mean, does that change your way of, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna stick within the fourth year, we're never gonna get a salary change, I don't think, for anybody. I don't know. I'd certainly prefer to do it in the first year, after the election, but there's no way to do it all together.
Doesn't seem to be. I don't know, Paul may have an opinion on that too, but it looks to me like the state law controls as far as the council's
As far as the
concerned.
council
Yeah.
goes, yeah.
I did notice that in the county code, yeah, 'cause, I heard some feedback, and I do understand why some people that were on the compensation commission, they weren't thrilled that, that we did all this work and it was just, it came to nothing. And I understand that. I mean, I know they put a lot of time into it. And it does seem to say that our county code, in the county code, it says that each council, so it sounds like every 4 years it has to meet. In the county charter, it doesn't necessarily require it to meet every 4 years. Should we maybe look at changing the county code to stop requiring that they meet every 4 years? And so then we do have an option that if there is no appetite on the council to raise salaries, let's just have that out of the way at the beginning and not have the commission go through it. I mean, would that be something we should maybe consider, is just amending the county code so they don't have to meet every 4 years?
Well, just to maybe go a little bit beyond your question, right now, under the state law, you don't have to do it even for the council.
Yes, I'm saying.
The language is optional. It says the county council may.
But
Doesn't have to, you know.
The county code makes it sound like they do have to meet every 4 years.
Because I was focusing primarily on what the state law required, I'm not sure, but if it does require it in the charter, it could be made optional as well. That's,
Yeah, 'cause
would be
the way I read the charter
would be a
is-
possible change.
The way I read the charter is they don't have to meet every 4 years, but under the county code, they do have to meet every 4 years. So maybe we change county code. so
Yeah, the county
they
code,
Don't have to
you-
meet every 4 years.
Yeah,
and
county
maybe-
code you could just change without doing a charter amendment.
That may be a way to avoid, I mean, there's the political consideration that you talk about, Matt, that, it's hard to raise salaries the fourth year. I mean, and if we recognize that, then maybe they shouldn't necessarily have to meet every 4 years if they're just gonna go through all this work.
I agree.
And there's not a political will to do it. So, maybe that's a way not to address your concerns exactly, but to, I don't know, make it so it's not quite as of a bad situation.
Right.
So, I don't know, I mean, we don't have to consider that right now.
Well,
but
it sounds to me like there isn't a charter. It sounds to me like we're talking about removing it from the charter And removing it from the code completely?
Yeah, I'm talking about, I'm using this hijack tool to talk about a code issue, yeah.
Well, no, that's important. So the idea is to remove this from the charter and the code as well, right?
I'm not saying take it out of the charter. You mean?
I thought that's what you
You
were
mean
suggesting.
amend the charter? I mean the county charter?
Yes.
No.
Leave
Just
the
take-
charter as it is, just
Yeah.
take it out of the code.
Yeah.
Although
take it out.
just looking, right now, I'm just looking at the charter language, and it does say that the county council shall establish. So,
But shall
a commission.
Yeah, but,
Now, this is in regard to the county council and the county exec.
yeah.
So it does sound mandatory in the charter.
Right.
I thought he
So
was suggesting-
possibly we would have to amend both, the
Okay, well,
code and the charter.
I guess maybe that's something to look at. You know, it says we shall establish it, but it doesn't say necessarily every 4 years, does it?
There's no guideline there.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it says
it-
of each council.
I think when you read through it, though, it
Each
sounds like
council,
it's
yeah.
just an automatic process. Once you've established it, now, you know, you're asking me for the first time, I didn't focus on this part of it, but maybe it's not absolutely mandatory, but at least looking at that first part, the word shall, that has a sort of a mandatory flavor to it.
Well, I thought it was saying here, within 15 days after the beginning of the fourth year of the term of each council, so that is a 4-year requirement.
Yeah,
Well, we can,
yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like, at least in the charter, it's mandatory that this commission go through its processes for the council and the exec, and at least right now, for both of them, that it submits its recommendation at the very beginning of the fourth year of the council's term.
But you're saying this is following a state law?
Yes, it's very much similar to the state law, except the state law is optional as far as the council is concerned. It says may establish. It looks like in our charter, we've gone to shall. And I think the reason for that is, and I go back probably just like Joe Holloway does a bit on this, but when we adopted some of the things in our charter, we copied them from other charters. And I'm gathering that wherever this was copied from, that's probably the way it reads.
Matt, did you say you liked the wording of immediately following?
I do, but that would mean that we're committing to calling up the review committee twice. If we wanted to do
You know,
the executive first year after the election and the council the fourth year.
Well, they've already done the work.
the
wouldn't
only
change
thing,
much.
yeah, the only thing I would suggest is if you did that, instead of saying immediately after, say something like within 3 months, or, because let's face it, when a county council gets sworn in, oft-times, half or more of the members are neophytes. And, you know, to say, well, the first thing you're going to do when you get sworn in is appoint this commission, I don't think it's necessary or just good practice.
well, maybe this may be something for the Charter Review Committee to hash
Yeah.
out. Not have politicians
Right.
talking about, you know, that, it sounds like it's more complicated on second and
Yeah.
third dig than,
And I mean, we're already getting feedback from the review committee about how many times they've been on this thing and not taking any recommendations. Now we're going to talk about calling them up twice.
I can see
I don't
the
think it's gonna go
frustration.
over very
Well, he's
well.
about the charter review committee.
No, but I'm talking about the allowance of compensation, so I think we do allow it
Compensation committee.
to go to the charter review committee. That's a good idea.
Okay. Anything else? Next item is Charter Section 304C, Council Administrator and Special Assistants, removed by resolution.
That one came about when we had the investigation last year, and we did not authorize a contract by resolution. So the question is, do we want to leave by resolution in that charter section?
Run that by us again.
When we had the investigation last year, 2017, we hired a auditor, and we did not initially approve that contract by resolution. The charter specifically says by resolution. So we later went back and did that. The question is now, should we leave by resolution in there, or we should take it out?
isn't some of the thinking on this that, particularly if you're doing a fraud investigation and you had to do it by resolution, it would essentially tip the,
That's it.
I
Yes.
think that's the primary reason.
That was it.
Yeah, and I don't know whether in those circumstances, maybe Paul has some thought on this, whether you can ever do a resolution outside of a public meeting. I just don't know. That's a new one on me. I mean, the standard practice, obviously, is to do it in an open meeting, but
I think the idea was to give us more latitude, being able to remove this gave us more latitude to go ahead and make that higher.
well, that's true, but I think essentially, even if you took out the words by resolution, if you got together and made a decision to do it, it would be tantamount to a resolution. So I guess I don't know whether something like that can be done in a closed session. I mean, if a resolution can be done in a closed session on something like that, then there's it seems to me, no pressing need to change the language from what it is now.
Well, we don't, approve all of our contracts by resolution. There are some contracts, as Paul knows, don't come before council for approval. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think if it can be discussed in closed session and council's comfortable with that, then we wouldn't need a resolution.
And that might be. I mean, I just don't know, sitting here today, what the answer to that would be.
Certain subjects you can
Yeah,
make
yeah.
a decision in closed session.
So,
You don't have to be enclosed and then come out into open to vote a decision.
but I think if we leave the,
Like,
if
say
we,
a decision to buy real estate.
but if the language remains, though, Paul, the words by resolution, does
Oh,
that
yeah,
then,
if
does
the
that then
language
throw it into an open?
Remains, I think that throws it into
Yeah.
open session.
So
Right.
maybe you do want to take that out then.
That sounds like to me, that sounds like a high priority item. I don't know if we're going to be able to explain it quite to the public, but
It'd have to be limited pretty severely. I mean, once we get away with, it'd have to be very specific circumstances that would be allowed then. Because we can't just give ourselves broad power to hire people without resolution. The public deserves to know in almost every circumstance if we're hiring people.
well, it's a good point. I mean, how we fine tune it would be, I guess, phase 2 before we get there, right? I mean, we may have to add some more language. Instead of just striking the one word by resolution, we might have to
I mean,
explain the special
And
circumstances.
I think it should be more explanatory.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we can't just say, take out by resolution. That means that gives us broad power just to do whatever, without public view, which is not proper for us to do. So
Okay.
I think we gotta be careful with this, that we don't go too far in the direction of removing stuff from public view. So.
Well, just one thought on that, though, Mr. Gilmer. The actual making of a contract on something like that isn't really making governmental policy.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure there's a whole, I mean, the concern, I understand it, but I don't think it's overwhelming.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's not making policy, but again, it's actions that we take and spending money, doing things like that, again, the default should be, public should be able to see what we do.
I think if it-
And only at a very limited, even with this broad resolution, my view is that you can have a resolution that does not spell out all the details and still hire something like that. I mean, I don't necessarily see the need for this. I think we can handle it under current practice. But I think my views might be the minority on the council, so.
Kind of like as Mr. Captain Wilson had mentioned earlier today, he couldn't discuss the investigation at Pittsville. I mean, there are certain times that this body may not want the public to know that an investigation is going on.
Yeah.
And that would be the reason for taking that by resolution.
I understand.
Maybe that should be certain members of the public.
I see the need for this. I mean, we came under what I believe was unnecessary criticism for just trying to do our job as was, necessary. And trying to suggest that we were in violation of these particular charges to keep us from doing what we thought was in the best interest of the public.
I understand, we have to think of the wider ramifications too, not just the one circumstance we went through that hopefully will not be repeated, so.
I hope, yeah, and like I said, I think there's other language we could put to maybe make it a little more.
Well, yeah, and I think to that concern, I think the next section is far more important, actually. I think it's
Yeah.
far more pressing.
Any further discussion on 304C? On the next section, 305, the county internal auditor, need to add the county internal auditor has the authority to consult with county employees and contractors, vendors regarding any internal county control, administrative and operating practices and procedures, and other pertinent financial compliance matters. If an audit indicates the possibility of fraud, the internal auditor has full power to do whatever is necessary to determine whatever such fraud occurred, including interviewing personnel. This has obviously come about because when we were looking at a fraud investigation, we were told that a limited interpretation of the charter did not give Mr. Roser full authority to do all that was necessary. And that being the case, we had a fraud investigation that was completely obstructed.
Right.
Go ahead, Mr. Roser.
If I could.
Thank you.
Yeah, on this one. Yeah, the auditors need to access personnel, vendors, and contractors. The standards are clear in order for us to maintain our independence and our mission. We like the Baltimore County language. If you look at page 2 of this handout, section D, on the second page, it says duty to cooperate with auditor, retaliation prohibited, and there's 2 items under that. I think we need to make it clear, the internal auditors need to be able to access documentation which may be in the hands of vendors, contractors, and certainly needs to have access to personnel in order to do its job. And the standards for internal auditors reiterate that, and our audit manual under section 100B also says the same thing. Internal auditors shall have full, free, and unrestricted access to records, personnel, and physical properties relevant to the performance of an audit. And I think we need some kind of language in there to try to firm that up a little bit. I think that's very important for the mission of internal auditor.
It says here to consult with county employees. Is consult the correct word?
Are you reading,
I'm talking,
D?
I'm talking about our email,
On the list,
on the list.
number 5.
305, number 5, 305, need to add the
yeah,
county internal auditor has the authority to consult with county employees. Should that not be question county employees?
Interview.
Have access to question or something?
I think have access period should be the way that would read. I would defer to Bob on that, but I really like the language in this Baltimore County section. As far as background
What
goes.
section
on
are
that-
you looking at, Mr. Roser, that you would like to?
D.
Can you read that to us?
Yes, D, it says duty to cooperate with auditor, retaliation prohibited, number 1. An employee and other persons associated in any manner with the expenditure of county funds shall cooperate with the county auditor in the performance of the auditor's duty under his section. Number 2, an employee or other person who assists or provides information to the county auditor or the auditor's staff may not be retaliated against, penalized, or threatened in any manner as a result of assisting with or providing information to the county auditor or the auditor's staff.
Well, that one really limits you to people that are expending county funds. That means you couldn't talk to a truck driver from the county.
I think that's a good point, and I think that could be made a little bit broader for that very reason that you're pointing out.
I mean, it just
That
says.
not every employee is associated with the
county
expenditure.
expenditure. So it needs to be.
Right. I think what we're suggesting here is that we work with Bob and Laura and try to incorporate some of this Baltimore County language and rewrite this section a little bit differently for your consideration.
And it's gotta be,
But it's very important, again, to the mission of the internal auditor, that we have something in our law that says the auditor has access to what the auditor needs in order to perform the function of the office.
Well, I think this is a priority, and this probably should be one
I
of
do
those
too.
goes on the ballot. While our attorney and Shirley is looking over this, maybe we should all, on a separate track, look at this Baltimore County language and see if we need something in county code to do, I mean, because there's nothing in county code that talks about the internal auditor that I can find. Is there's something in the charter? Maybe some of this stuff should be in the code, that we can, change the chart, suggest a change in the charter to the extent necessary, and then some of this other stuff is spelled out in code. Because we could pass a code that could maybe mirror this. This looks like an excellent county code. That all doesn't have to be in the charter, though.
I think where it says Baltimore County Code, I think that may be typo. I think it may be in their charter. I've looked at it quickly, and the Baltimore County website is a little bit hard sometimes to interpret. You kind of wish you had the book in front of you. But I believe that's in their charter and not their code. I think there are two provisions in their charter, which seems unusual, but, in any event, it perhaps should be somewhere in one or the other. We'll just have to
Yeah,
look
that's
at
what I'm
it.
saying, to your, because a lot of this seems like good language, but maybe it doesn't have to be in the charter. We could have it part of the code, because it looks like there's a, Baltimore County Charter, one section, and then the rest is spelled out in the county code. It's separated on here, so.
It's
But
a little,
that's for the
believe me,
lawyer.
when you look at their website, it's a little hard to figure it out. I just, at least for this person.
It's a really good point, Mr. Taylor, as far as what measures should we be addressing charter-related versus code?
No, I agree. I agree with you on that. And we maybe
In
need to
all-
look a
in all
little
cases.
harder at the Baltimore County, maybe give them a call and just make sure which is where in their world.
Yeah.
So, that's an interesting point, but what authority do we have to uphold the code or the charter if it's violated?
Well, we're always going to be limited to that. I mean, we'd have to go to court, which is what no one wants to do, but that's always the unfortunate last.
I guess we can
Resort.
put, I mean, a county code can have penalties in it for violation of the code. I mean, so that could be part of it. We could talk about that. What happens if the county code's violated? We can put penalties in there. I mean, so we could do that, right, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, is the thinking, I guess, then that maybe Laura, Steve, and I get together and maybe put something on your plate to look at, both in terms of the charter and the code? Would that be
Yep. Next item is the Charter Section 609A, Legislative Powers of County Council update reference of Article 25A to local government article. That sounds a little bit like number one.
This is purely housekeeping. I think this could be deferred to the next Charter Review Committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Section 315A, confirmation of appointments, add Assistant Director of Administration and all Deputy Directors.
That was a recommendation by a council member. I did check some other counties. The only other county that I found that does council does a confirmation of deputy directors is Hartford County. And I do have a copy of that language I can pass around.
What was the thought on wanting to confirm deputy directors?
I think it was initially discussed as a deputy director could take on as important a role as a director. If the director were to leave, then you have a department head for the most part.
That's what we had for a number of years.
That works. Yeah, that would be in control
Yeah.
for,
But did we fix that?
They can only be in, don't you have to?
Isn't there a
once a month
timeline? I thought we,
With the last charter?
there's a 90-day timeline.
Well, that's an acting.
Yeah, that's acting, it's not appointment or a promotion.
yeah, but you can't be promoted to a director of a department without confirmation.
Well, there's that 90-day rule as far as they have to do that if they're an acting director. I guess it could be that this person could be a deputy director and not be an acting director,
And just still be the
and
director.
just be a deputy director.
Yeah, that's right. It could be left. And the other ramification of that is you got a budget that you're budgeting a director for, but you're not
Not paying
It's not
salaries.
paying anybody, and the money could be used for something else,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
you hear what I said?
yeah, I did. I just don't know sitting here, I couldn't swear to it, but it sounds right.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that particular?
I think that's kind of an important one.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next one, Charter Section 507B, Department of Law. Should the county attorney review all contracts of the legislative branch of government? That's come about simply because at the point in time where there was really only one county attorney, and that's what you did, that's just what you did. I think there's instances now that we have contracts that even the county attorney hasn't approved. But I think the criticism came when the council took particular measures with Mr. Taylor's blessing, I'm assuming?
No, this one actually came about going back to hiring that forensic auditor. We did not have the county attorney review that contract, and that was one of the county executive's concerns.
What is that? Which contract was that now?
When we hired the forensic
Oh,
accountant
okay, yeah.
or auditor.
And to a certain degree, this problem would resolve itself just in the fact that we have other legal resources. Okay, next item, Section 508, Citizen Advisory Boards, add county council after county executive, so the county council can also appoint citizen advisory boards.
That one came about when we had the Animal Ordinance Committee. We found out that we were not able to appoint that citizen committee ourselves. We actually had to get a recommendation from the county executive in order to do that.
I mean, it's probably a good idea for us to have the power to do that. I don't know how pressing it is, though. I mean, I don't know if that's,
I think it's important, but I don't know if it's,
yeah, if,
if we're trying to narrow this down to two.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure if it's up there.
Yeah, that's a number level 2, that's a level 2 priority. The final one is to transfer of appropriations, add the county executive, however, is to notify the county council of appropriations between general classification and expenditures within the same office or departments that total over a certain amount.
That one actually came from Mr. Taylor. He made that recommendation. Now, I did look at some other counties. Let's see. Prince George's County, they say that the transfers have to be approved by council if they're exceeding $250,000 in one fiscal year. And then
Is that a one-time amount or total?
is aggregate, so it'd be
Okay.
total. Baltimore County's council would approve interprogram transfers in excess of 10% of appropriations in the current expense budget. And then Montgomery County doesn't say that it requires council's approval, but it just says that you cannot have cumulative transfers from any one appropriation not exceed 10% of the original appropriation.
I think just a comment, I think for ease of operation, that it would be simpler just to put in some amount, $5,000, $10,000. And if I made this recommendation several months ago, I forgot to say there probably should be some time aspect to it. Because right now, the language that's in there, if that's my language, is there's nothing, he could give you notice 3 years from after the transfer is made. So you probably want something within 30 days or something of the sort like that.
Prior to?
It would be a good idea probably to have prior to. Now, there might be some, maybe quasi-emergency. But nevertheless, I think that's a good idea.
well, and this is just notification, not, the council doesn't have to approve.
Not
It's just
No, no.
notifying.
And in fact, the reason I made the suggestion was, it went back to some of the things that the budget got out of whack on. And there were some transfers made because of that, and if council had been notified, perhaps that whole situation would have come to light and been addressed much earlier. And you would have known about it at the time, which is a good idea.
So we don't go far as to change the language for council concurrence.
Well, that's up to you all. I mean, it's certainly a thought, but I mean, it seems to me, if you're going to do that, there might be some level under which you don't need approval. I mean, if they're going to transfer $50 to go buy some stationery,
Oh, no, we're
for
talking about
example.
major things.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. In other
I
words, there
mean,
might be.
if we're told to pass a budget for roads or something because they specifically needed a, $75,000.
Well, I think you'd want
piece
to
of
know,
machinery,
yeah.
and then it turns out after that year, that machinery was never purchased, they used that 70,000 for something else. We can't do line item cuts, we understand that, but that isn't that could be
Mm-hmm.
a very unusual circumstance where,
Yeah, I'm just thinking of some
It's
threshold
a bit
below
misleading.
which you wouldn't have to do it, just because it's essentially peanuts. 100, 250, 500, wherever you want to put it.
Mark, you have great respect for the separation of
Yeah,
types.
I think notification is probably fine. I don't know, important, I mean, I don't know if this rises the level, trying to get us into micromanaging, that sort of stuff.
Just notification, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be sitting here all
Yeah,
day.
I understand, but can you understand how many different ways you can skin a cat on notification?
Well, I think that's old.
Yeah.
Well, if we can nail down the language on that to make it very specific on the requirements of notification.
And a time frame.
Yeah,
there's time.
30, does 30 days sound good? I mean, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. What I would suggest is that council members re-review all of these, try to come up with an opinion on your own as to which three you like the most and you want to think are the most important.
You want to do 3?
Yeah, well, we'll do three, and if we want to cut it to two, that's fine, but if we could pick three,
Go.
and then we'll fine tune this down. We don't have to have an advertisement for a public hearing just because we want to have a public hearing, but we could put a public hearing on the agenda for this event,
You certainly can, yes.
and it would be a public hearing. I mean, we could have public comments, public hearing, then public comments, and the public hearing could specifically be about charter amendments. But we are not held to advertising that. Now, how effective
We
it
could
may
put
or
it on the
may not be.
website. We could advertise it on the county's website.
Yes, so there may be ways to promote this without spending the fortune it would cost to document all this in the newspaper.
I mean, I think we let the public know, we hear from them, and we don't have to do this. We're starting pretty early this time, we started kind of late last time, so there's definitely time for the public to give us their input on any of this stuff. So-
Yeah, I don't think we have to call it a public hearing. We can just say we're seeking public input.
Right.
That way it gets us away from the public hearing requirements.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, there are really no public requirement. We can call it a public hearing, but we wouldn't be obligated to put it in the newspaper. Usually, it's not.
There's not a legal requirement for us to have a public hearing on the proposed charter amendments.
No, I know, but if we call it a public hearing, do we have to advertise?
That would be a legal question.
That's good. That's a good question. I would not think so if it's not required by law, just
Okay.
because you call it that.
So we can put it on the next agenda, have a public hearing.
Let's not rush it.
Yeah. And a lot of people watch PAC 14 anyway, so they're gonna get the
Yeah, give
word
us some time.
from
We
watching.
got time, Chad, it's all right.
Okay, any other
We do.
questions?
No.
No? Okay. But come up with three, I hate, we could have another work session the next meeting, unless you want to wait a little bit.
I'll wait.
All right,
Let them proclaim.
a little ways on. Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn so we can go into closed work session.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Means adjourned.